Okay, so for this one, I'm going to be covering off a few different ones. So yeah, I've got a couple of main dreams, and I've got a flash image that came up that I'll cover off. So that, again, this is all piecing together bits and pieces. They're all starting to really come together. I've found another one that's probably going to create potentially another series. Actually, I would, yeah, potentially. We will see, and then we'll be more or less done. Okay, so getting very, very close. Right, so this dream, I'm just going to quickly find when this one happened. 9th of October 2025. So I've actually already filmed quite a long time ago, actually, a dream that happened on the same date. So it's just a second dream that I had on that same day. So this one then. So this all starts with the setting for this one is where there's quite a lot of people all sitting around a big conference table. Loads and loads of people sitting around this table, all representing nations. I didn't get a sense that they were actually world leaders, but more like sort of like diplomats, let's say. So diplomats, ambassadors, those kind of people. So they're representing the countries, but they weren't actually the leaders of those countries. So there was basically a vote that was taking place, and I was witnessing that vote. But I didn't get a clear understanding as to the reason for the vote necessarily. But this vote was all the nations. They had different coloured beads that they were putting into this. I put here a clay-looking vase, but there's a bit I mentioned later that doesn't really make sense to it being clay, because then how can I see the beads going, the colour of the beads? So I'm not 100% sure, but I have put here a clay vase, so obviously that's what I mentioned. But yeah, a vote taking place, and all these nations had different coloured beads that were representing their country, I guess, or more accurately, the country that they were voting for. So yeah, all lots of different colours. The colour of the bead that you were voting with represented your vote for that particular country, and it seemed that there was some sort of voting going on, and it was really down to now. It was between Russia and France. Russia was a red bead and France was a blue bead, and it seemed to be votes around military strength in some way is what it was seemed to be a case of. Voting was to do with that, and it had been considered that actually Russia was doing particularly well when looking at their army aspect, but it was basically kind of assessing the strength of their entire armed forces. So it wasn't just the army; it was the air force, the navy, it was all of that sort of stuff, all thrown in. It was kind of like that: who would be the victor, I guess, or who had the best total military force when everything's all considered. So, as I said, Russia were out in front when it came to the army aspect, but when everything was considered, unexpectedly, France actually won. As for the aspects that whatever they were voting on, they ended up coming in top. As I said, it seemed to be a vote of strength, but anyway, while this voting was going on, I was very aware that the person at the head of the table, I put here, was because I think my point of view was I was sitting at the head of the table, but down the opposite end, and I was looking towards the person who was at the head of the table down the opposite end. And I happened to mention actually that I noticed yes, it says here, I mentioned to the person to my left and to my right that this person was trying to manipulate others. So whoever was at the head of the table was trying to manipulate other people. And I know that this guy was from an Arab country, one of those many countries, and he knew that he could never win this vote, as his country. But what he was doing was obviously manipulating others around the table to sway the vote to the way that he would prefer, knowing that he was never going to win it. So he was kind of throwing away his vote, but to a certain extent, knowing his country's never going to win, but was trying to manipulate all the countries around him so that whoever they would prefer to win won. Okay. So the reason we knew it was down to France and Russia was because if we saw someone turn the vase around or something to see the name of the nation that was gaining the most points, I guess that's what it was talking about. So I put a little bit of it, that's all there really was to it. It's very, very brief. So transparency. So I had watched some videos. So transparency, is there anything that could have affected my dream? I had watched some videos, and it was talking about tensions between China and India in mountainous regions around the borders, and that Pakistan had been being used as a proxy, and that China was actually providing Pakistan with Chinese weapons to use. So maybe this could have affected the dream in some way, given that it's various different countries involved. Again, India, China, Pakistan in this wide watched. Could that have affected the dream in some way? Maybe. I'm going to go on to another part of the dream as well, which may well be relevant. It doesn't seem it, but I think maybe the messaging might be. So there was just a small part I was in a bar environment, so like a sort of bar environment where there was two people that were playing pool. One of them was very, very good, and the other was not at all very good, not good at all. But the one that wasn't very good started to do lots and lots of practicing. So it was kind of like, they knew that they were absolutely no match for this particular person that they were playing pool with. So what did they do? Well, they went and they did a lot of practicing behind the scenes. So they had even they were doing things like putting chalk marks on, so they were measuring out the angles. So if you were wanting to hit a ball that was in a let's say a pocket that's down there, and you were doubling it off, bouncing it off the cushion, and they were kind of measuring the angles, and I saw like chalk marks and stuff like that were measuring all the angles. So they'd even use chalk to mark the multiple angles and tactics drawn on the felt. So many angles were worked out. So the real match started, and this poor player that before was no match whatsoever had actually now become a far, far better opponent. And I put here, not sure why I saw this. Thoughts? Could just be a dream, or it could represent a nation that is not really a player right now, but they use their time between matches, or let's say conflicts, to understand all the angles and plan for the next engagement, maybe. This is if we're continuing, obviously, the narrative of the previous dream, which I just mentioned. I called it like the not so united nations. Was the not united nations, or something to that effect. The previous dream that I felt, because it was lots of nations around a table having a discussion, even though it wasn't the world leaders and it was diplomats, I still felt that it probably represented the United Nations in some way. That's what it felt like. I didn't get the context behind the vote really, nor know why the outcome, what it even meant for the winner. Okay, so France has won. What does that mean? I didn't know whether there was some sort of geopolitics sort of going on there, almost like I don't know, almost like a planned outcome, I suppose. I don't know. I don't really know about that one, but I thought it was interesting, the fact that the working out all the angles, that kind of stuff. Somebody who was maybe a defeated opponent initially, they go back to the drawing board. They realize from their first engagement what they need to do in their next engagement. Okay, where that can fit into scripture, it could do with a lot of the nations that are having conflicts at the moment, but I won't go into that because there's so many different thoughts around prophecy and stuff like that around the potential nations that it could represent. I don't necessarily really want to get into it because I could make a real mess of it, to be honest. So what I would say about why did France come out on top in a real engagement, I don't think they would, not even remotely close to Russia. I mean, if Russia actually properly use their navy and all of their assets, I don't think that France would have even a chance. I've been watching, actually, as it goes at the moment, stacks and stacks of war simulations involving the navy, the air force, ground attacks, all of that kind of stuff, where it's using real official numbers when it comes to missiles, planes, boats, capabilities, all that kind of stuff. So I see this kind of stuff actually quite frequently. I think it's highly unlikely that France would be able to hold their own in any capacity against Russia. I mean, I think there's a lot of nations, including my own, the UK, where we really punch above our weight, when it comes to threatening nations that we wouldn't last 5 minutes against, and it's quite embarrassing, really, sometimes with the sort of threats that are made and stuff. You think we can't back this up. Stop saying all this stuff. It's just embarrassing sometimes. Right. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next stream. So we're moving from, 9th of the 10th, 2025 to 17th of the 10th, 2025 now. So this one starts where I'm in my own back garden. Again, this is back in my childhood house, which is where so many of my dreams take place. And then the part that was actually, I'll describe our back garden. It's a very small back garden, by the way. It was just kind of like a patio, sort of paved area that was quite thin. I mean, it couldn't have been more than probably about 2 to 3 meters deep, something like that. And lengthwise, again, not particularly big, 10, 12, 13 meters, maybe, something like that. Not particularly wide. And the same as far as the depth then. Well, as soon as you got beyond, there was a brick wall, basically, that went all the way around behind this paved area. So you'd walk out of the doors into the back garden, onto the paved area. Then there'd be a wall, quite a low wall, and then it would all be grass. And then you've got like a shed and our fence and stuff like that. It was quite a shallow garden. But in this dream, basically everything beyond that wall was water. So obviously not reality. So where is it? Oh, there we go. I've even written the dimensions down here. Pretty similar to what I mentioned, to be fair. Maybe I've been a bit more pessimistic when it comes to the width, but yeah, doesn't really matter. In reality, there we go. We had a low wall, and that was only about it was a bit higher than that, wasn't it? About 2 foot high, I would say. It was a very, very low wall, and it went to just a slightly raised garden, basically. So it was almost, as the raised garden sort of went up, was probably about 1 foot difference. So it was about 1 foot above the ground level at the actual garden level. Again, not that it's relevant. Not that it's relevant, but it was a low wall. Is basically what I'm saying. Boundary between the paved area was slightly raised above the garden. There we go. Well, that raised garden was gone completely, and it was just open sea. So it's open ocean, really, going all the way basically as far as you could see. But there was actually a submarine, not all that far off, that had actually launched torpedoes at us, at our house. Okay, so I'm seeing this torpedo. This what's it called? Submarine. It's not really all that far away, but it's firing off these torpedoes, and these torpedoes were coming towards us so slow, so incredibly slow. And this actually is typical of a lot of my dreams, actually, because even in that same garden, I had a dream where it was a UFO one, and it's called Alien Invasion, and these aliens were firing missiles, and they were just kind of coming down all over the place, but really slow. And when they actually hit, it was just a little poof. It's kind of like, what was I even worried about? And I've had other ones in Exodus, so future Exodus I mentioned. They had missiles coming over with a flag on them, which was a Middle Eastern flag, let's say, or the colours of a lot of Middle Eastern nations coming across. And they were coming off really, really slow, to the point where it was like, oh, here's another missile. Everybody just duck, that kind of thing. It was like, just move out of the way and let it go over. It wasn't a big deal until they started lobbing stacks of them over, and then it was a bit different. But it's very much like that. So very, very slow moving. And where are we? Yeah. So for some reason, we had a crew of our own. So we had all these kind of like Navy crew, I guess, that were on this patio sort of area from our house. And one of them got out to where the actual torpedo was, because it was going so slow. Before it actually hit, they managed to get on top of this torpedo, and made a hole in the casing, which caused the fuel to actually leak out of this torpedo. And so they somehow managed to also redirect this torpedo towards the brick wall that I'd mentioned earlier. I can only assume that this was the best thing that they could do, really, was to aim it towards the brick wall. But as mentioned, it was only like very, very short distance until it would be at our house. So even if this torpedo actually went off where it went off, it would kill everybody in the house, definitely, because it was so incredibly close. You know, as I said, what did I say about? What did I say distance was? Like 3 meters, something like that. You know, so we're only talking about like sub 10 feet. You know, it's not far at all. I can assume that this redirect was like the best option that they could come up with, and because we weren't at a safe distance for any kind of big explosion going off. But in the end, while it hit the wall, it didn't actually explode. So we've got a torpedo coming towards us from an enemy, obviously, that's going to hit home. It gets diffused in some way, technically not diffused as such, that the fuel's taken out of it. But no explosion. No explosion actually happened. I put, to be fair, when the missiles have actually hit in previous dreams, the explosion's always been this little poof sort of thing anyway. The black submarine was actually stationary, I've put, and I later remember being out at sea in my own submarine. And so I think I was maybe almost like our house was a dock, you know, or a shipyard or something like that rather than a house. But I think that our sub was a US sub. And the one that had fired on us was a Russian submarine. Okay. So again, this is why I'm putting this connection between the two, because we've got Russians again. I know there's stuff going on, obviously, current events when it comes to Russians, but, you know, and obviously a long conflict between, you know, the Cold War and stuff like that with the US and Russians. Obviously, that's never been resolved, has it, really, when it comes to superpowers. But I also remember that when we were out on this submarine, that we actually saw a killer whale in the open sea, and that we were thinking that it was actually a submarine, given that we were seeing it from a distance, and it looked very, very similar to a submarine, because obviously it's a killer whale being a dark, sort of blackish, dark grey, you know, sort of colour in comparison to the submarines. They looked sort of similar. Obviously, they wouldn't be in size unless it was an incredibly small submarine, but that's basically how that dream finished. So what my thoughts were, so I'm just quickly looking to see if there's any transparency. So transparency first. Yeah, okay. So I was playing. Yeah, okay. So I was playing my boat game. So I have a boat game that I play quite frequently. I was playing my boat game before going to sleep. Shocker. That is the sort of thing I do. It's like my only little downtime is I finish work, you know, right, quick little go, couple of little games of, you know, using submarines, using standard boats and aircraft carriers and stuff to shoot at others in a little battle. But I've put here, it does have submarines, obviously, this game, but when I was actually playing the boat game, I wasn't using submarines, I was just using standard boats. I watched one of my own videos yesterday. Okay, so this was obviously, must have watched that on the 8th of October. Oh no, sorry, this was a different date, wasn't it? This was like the 17th of October, wasn't it? So let's say 16th of October. I've watched one of my videos. Where's it gone? In which I mentioned. Oh, okay. I'm talking about a dream I'm not actually going to cover off with you, just because it was so. Yeah. Okay. What can I say? There was a part 3 sort of dream. As I said, I've done part 1. I've completely ignored part 2 because it seemed completely random and not relevant. Part 3, very, very short moment of me seeing me playing a Command and Conquer style computer game. So again, you can look that up if you want. It's a tactics sort of game where you build up military units, build up your base. You have an enemy base you're against, and you just attack each other, and whoever wins. You know, generally just between you and an enemy. And I'd actually. Yeah. Oh, okay. Right. So I write that my video in season 1 that has the name Dark Star in it, actually had this Command and Conquer in it as well. And actually, when I mentioned the other video I've done this morning, I was playing another computer game that was very, very similar, which is where I was building up. It was the one that had wolves and stuff in, where I was building a house there. I saw that as a computer game, actually, and that reminded me of a computer game I used to play, which was called Civilization. So this was kind of like, and that's a conflict game as well, you know, where it's all strategy and stuff like that, which is what this game is all about. But I remember it being, I said, when I was playing this particular computer game in this part 3 of my dream, I said I remember it being very much focused on the sea aspect. and I was making sure that the sea aspect of this game was established with submarine build. I was building submarine shipyards, so that's where there is actually a real connection to do with this particular dream, which is to do with submarines. But this main submarine, or this torpedo attack kind of thing that happens, is part one. And then I had this other dream, which was like a third dream of the night, which was talking about submarines. So that's where I'm going with this transparency, where I say I was playing a boat game, etc., etc. And then I also was, I've always had a dream that was talking about, this Command and Conquer kind of game I used to play. So there's another aspect about the dream I'm not going to mention. Okay, that's it for transparency. The other dream that I won't go through is just to do with me visiting a college sort of thing, a school kind of environment. Well, the day before I'd gone and visited a college with my daughter, so it kind of seemed a bit, and it had such a small dream, didn't really make sense for me to cover off. Okay, so part one, so the torpedo attack. So it had some interesting aspects. It also had some interesting aspects I wanted to think through the meanings of. So I used my dream book here. So I looked up submarine. What does submarine mean? Well, I'm just going to quickly run these off. What can a submarine mean in a dream? It can mean potentially not openly shown, or not public, or not shown in public. An underground church. It can be a church in the spirit. Spiritual vessel not yet revealed. Again, it's saying spiritual this because of the water aspect, because the Holy Spirit, represented in Scripture as water, mentioned quite a lot. So that's where that connection is. A church in the spirit, because it's maybe because it's in water. Let's say spiritual vessel not yet revealed, again because submerged. The spirit, submarine, searching underwater. So it can mean the spirit. Which interestingly, I did have a water series, which is all about water. But there is a bit that's got a submarine in it, and it says here the spirit, meaning, and that was my conclusion actually, somewhat a spoiler there. A whale can mean a prophetic ministry, a leader who is sensitive to the spirit. Again, this water connection, you see. A great fish, well, obviously from Jonah, the prophet Jonah. It was a great fish. Or a big fish is another one as well. So it could be an influential believer. Okay, so that's whale. Torpedo, when I looked up torpedo, it actually sent me to find the meaning, which was actually written in missile and bomb. So I looked up missile and bomb. What does it say there? So it says powerful words, words of destruction, a word of God, if it's a guided missile, a sermon, an attack, a judgment, an infliction. A bomb can mean words of sudden detrimental impact, obviously a bomb being dropped. Explosive or shocking words. It can mean 3, sudden destructive event. It can mean 4, a shocking announcement. Can be empowered by the Holy Spirit. Words, positive or negative, that burn. Unresolved issues that will blow up in the future, like a time bomb. Explosive outbursts. So very, very varied. Obviously, the dream book that I use, again, I've called it, what's it called? The Divinity Code, which will be in the description. It can be very, very varied. It is just a course provider. It really is a course provider. It gives you little things like sudden destructive event. Because there was a sudden destructive event in this dream. Okay, well, it probably means that then. And then it can just send you in a certain direction, So it is helpful, but it's not, believe me, I do not rely upon the book at all. So in putting this all together, could it have represented the UK? So this is talking about the torpedo attack, as it seemed to have, could it be that where I am, so I'm standing and I'm in a house or whatever I'm in, surrounded by water, could I just be, or where my location be, representing the UK? We are an island surrounded by water. So could I have been representing the UK, as it seemed to be, surrounded by water, or at least was I on the coast? But like an island possibly. That I was saved by the US, because obviously we have this US sub, which is off the coast. which I actually had a message in my video called The Green Jeep. That was a crazy one. Green Jeep. You would see some videos in season 1 where I said, I had this dream. I just had this green Jeep in my dream. This happened, that happened. That was it. It's like 3 seconds, 5 seconds, this dream. And then it happened again. And I was just like, hang on a minute. I've had this green Jeep before. Identical. What does this mean? And I looked it all up and it all makes sense. But one of the messages was that I had been saved by the US in some way. So that's where I'm making this connection here. Is could it be possibly talking about us, the UK maybe, being saved by the US? To be fair, with that green Jeep one, I wasn't really sure what it meant by that. But maybe we're being saved from a conflict with Russia. Well, as I said, we do as a nation, we do gob off, shout our mouth and let it run a bit with a lot of these nations. As I said, I've already mentioned, bad idea. We can't back it up. We're just a nation really. I mean, our military is not bad. It's not too bad, but we're hiding really behind the nuclear shield, aren't we? As a nation, well, if it really kicks off, we'll just nuke you. So the stakes are a bit too high for a lot of nations to actually attack us because of that reason. But we've been scaling down our military to such a huge degree, relying upon the US for such a long time now, as have most of Europe, to be fair, under the nuclear umbrella. Anyway, moving on past that. And I've had a lot of dreams about nuclear bombs and stuff like that as well. So check out, if you haven't already, the nuclear series. That is really full on as to what I've seen in those dreams. Anyway, the other part. So as I said, just to quickly recap then. So the UK, could it represent the UK? We're saved by the US. But we somewhat diffuse the whole event because the torpedo that's coming in, gets diffused. I mean, the fuel is kind of taken out of it. It's redirected. Maybe it just delays it, but the torpedo fuel is drained. So maybe negotiation takes place, and let's say the fuel is taken out of this conflict that could blow up, obviously, but it doesn't. It gets de-escalated. However, it's our crew, so as in the UK crew, that did the redirect. So the whole whale thing coming in here, I don't know. I did actually write down, I wonder if it represents like a false flag sort of situation, maybe. Because if you think about it, if I've looked at this whale and I thought it's a submarine, what if I report back, we've seen a Russian submarine in the waters, and then the kind of Russia like, no, there isn't, but it all kicks off as a result of something that actually was never a submarine in the first place. I know, obviously, I obviously don't think our military is going to look at a whale and think it's a submarine, but interestingly, in these games that I've been watching, simulations, very, very high-tech, top-end simulations of, as I said, all the missiles and stuff like that I've been watching in YouTube videos. There was a submarine one that I saw recently, and he was showing this ship that was dropping, like a thing to listen in on submarines and stuff like that. And he said that the return would come back very similar to a whale. And so this ship with the AI was kind of investigating, and it was kind of like, oh, is that a submarine, or is that potentially a whale? Because the area that this was actually set in does have whales. So as soon as I say that and say how unrealistic it is that they would potentially think that a whale could be a submarine, maybe they could. But could it be a mistaken hostile escalation, let's say, with a nation, again in this, Russia, US, UK, but it was all a false flag sort of situation. It's all based on poor information, but it gets diffused, it gets de-escalated. Who knows? Could be something to do with that. And then I've just got a super quick flash image, and then we'll finish off. Okay, so this unfortunately isn't one with scripture in it, because it's not really much I can really get out of that as far as scripture goes, because it feels like could be talking about future events. It could just be a dream. With all of this, I'm not saying I'm given necessarily a message about things that can happen in the future. I've had some very, very close stuff, incredibly close, in fact. And I've really wished that I got the video out earlier so I could at least date stamp it and go, there you go, I told you that was going to happen. Not that I've ever said this is going to happen. But it's when you look back on the event that you go, wow, that is incredibly close. That's really close to what happened. But again, I've never predicted anything. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying I've had a lot of stuff that's been very, very close to events that have happened. So this is a flash image. So this goes back to when? 25th of the 11th, 2025. So a flash image is literally something that can be 1, 2, 3 seconds. That's it. So it's not really a dream. It's just an image that comes up. It can sometimes be at the end of the dream. It can sometimes be during the night, and then I wake up. I had this super, super brief thing, and then I write it down, and I go back into a dream or just go back to sleep. So, and I've even had them during the day. I have them during the day sometimes. But this one, I saw a mixture of army troops all with guns, and some of them with machine guns, and they're all crouching and firing off in a specific direction at an enemy, but I couldn't see this enemy. So they were just firing off, and I was thinking, well, who are you guys firing at? I couldn't really, as an observer, watching them fire, see who they were firing at. But they were firing, obviously, all heavy guns. And then there was this call to stop. And the heavy guns just stopped. And there was just those last delays of a couple of rifles just firing off, as it's kind of like, hold fire, that kind of thing. And all the heavy guns are finishing. And there's just a couple of little shots being fired off from those ones that have already maybe lined something up to shoot. And that was it. That was basically how it ended. So obviously not much at all. But it just makes me think of, obviously, stuff I've... where is it gone? Sorry, there was thoughts about a different dream, which I've already filmed there, that threw me for a second. Did make me think of... oh, okay, interesting. So apparently I'd done some prayers around repenting and asking for help, receiving that in the form of spiritual warfare. So could that just be literally talking about spiritual warfare? And that was kind of like an image of spiritual warfare actually happening. Because I couldn't see the enemy. So it's like an unseen enemy. Well, that would be the dark demonic forces, wouldn't it? An unseen enemy. Could mean that. But it could also mean the physical as well. I've put here, the scene was, where are we? I couldn't see the enemy, but felt it could mean others fighting on my behalf, maybe, and that maybe there could be some peace coming. The war scene was very kind of World War II looking, as to how it kind of looked like. But yeah, I mean, again, I think you could feed it in potentially into standard war as well. Maybe it is actually not necessarily talking about a spiritual war, but it could be. It could also be talking about an actual physical war, that peace is coming. Okay. And I've had a lot of dreams, maybe I wouldn't say a lot, but I have had a dream with peace coming, which I would say is gathering storm. Okay. That's a very, very visual dream. It's quite a long one, actually, but there's so much to unpack in that dream. But that was talking about a massive conflict on the horizon, and it coming into the point where I felt like it was going to consume the UK in getting involved in this. At the beginning stages, it was far off, it was distant. It was enough that we were looking at it. Let's say, if I'm representing the UK, that we were looking at it and we were a little bit concerned about it, but it was far enough away. We're not going to get involved in that. But suddenly it was on us, and we were like, well, we're going to get pulled up into this. So, and then there was a peace aspect, but it felt like it could be a short-term peace. And then I felt like it was almost like this conflict was on top of us, and it was just because it's about a tornado. It was about tornado, and it basically felt like a bit like you see in tornado movies, or documentaries or whatever, and you see the funnel just disappear, but the rotation is still there, and you're just looking for where it's going to suddenly touch down again. It felt very much like that. It felt to the point where it's almost over my house, and it was just going to drop down, and that was it. I was going to be obliterated. That's what it felt like. Okay, so that's a really interesting one. I felt that one. It was so visual, came from absolutely nowhere, and actually, I do occasionally watch a few dream channels, and I had somebody else who had a dream more or less exactly the same time as me. It was within a very, very short space, and it was almost identical. He described the same things, which were, I described orange lightning within this tornado, and he mentioned yellow and orange bits and pieces as well. I was like, wow, that's pretty much spot on. And it was included. It was talking about tornadoes and big storms and things like that, which is exactly what I saw. I thought, wow, that's incredibly close, incredibly close. So it's actually really quite fascinating when you find other people have the same sort of dreams as you. And so sometimes I'll comment on people's videos and go, yeah, I've had exactly the same dream, pretty much exactly the same dream as that, or yeah, I've had that element. And between us as like, let's say, sounds a bit dramatic, but it's like a dreamer community. There's a lot of people that get given dreams very, very similar to me. And it's interesting, the amount of overlap there is between people saying, oh, I had this dream about this. And you're like, yeah, me too. I had this dream about that. It's completely different. Yeah, me too. It's fascinating. And that's what actually inspired me to actually set up this channel, was initially that I had some massive dreams I wanted to share. And I thought, well, I'll do it via this other dream channel, and I'll submit my dream. And I was just going to do it just a quick shot, on my mobile like this. And I was just going to upload it. It just didn't work. So the only way I could get it to work was actually to load it up to a YouTube, and then I could give a YouTube link for her to then put it on her dream channel. So that's basically what did happen. And then my dream was featured and stuff like that. But and it was a rapture dream, as it goes, which is going to lead me into some of the kind of types of dreams I'm going to literally do next. So it's kind of quite a nice little segue there. But yeah, that's how this whole thing started. And then I was thinking, actually, I'm going to use this channel maybe as almost like a time capsule, of these are all the kind of dreams I was having at the time. So other people can obviously, family, friends can just drop in, watch some dreams, see what's kind of going on, see the kind of crazy journey that I've had from being a non-Christian only 3 years ago to now the kind of stuff that's going on, the dreams and the experiences and stuff like I've had. So now I have a YouTube channel, obviously, and I'm up to like over 140 videos. So, but as I said, I've already said this many times, we're pretty much at the end of this season now. So there's only really a couple more to go. I would think 2 or 3 videos max, I would imagine, from here. And then that'll be it. That will seal this season, and then it'll probably be about another 6 months. And then after about 6 months, I'll have probably enough material to then do another season. So that's basically how long it took for this season. And as I said, this is, was it 50 videos ish? So for 6 months, not bad as far as obviously how quickly these kind of all come around again. It's all gone very, very quiet as far as dreams go. I'm not really getting much in the way of dreams at the moment. I feel that's very much because of God sort of saying, let's get this finished. Then we'll start the dreams up again. But I have got a couple just little trailing dreams that saying things that I'm going to use now to finish off. Because I've also got ones to do with a harvest as well. I feel like there might be more there, but I haven't had any dreams to seal it and finish it all off. I've prayed on that just to say, look, am I going to get any more to do with a harvest, or am I just filming this and doing this one? So I'm kind of waiting, but I may well be doing one to do with a harvest soon as well, which is all feeds into a lot of this stuff. The way that I'm sort of finishing off this season really is, conflict coming. I feel that there is conflict coming, war escalations, things like that, and ultimately rapture sort of like things as well. Been getting a lot of those that I'm going to include, and then the harvest as well coming. So again, that kind of thing. This hasn't really been planned. This is just the way it's been slowly working its way out, and this is how the first season went as well. And how that, I think the first season finished was a lot to do with talking about lawlessness in the future and stuff like that. But certainly had a lot of that recently, for sure. That's it. So that's this one all finished. And I'll start really kind of putting together all of these other dreams, because there's probably 5 here that I want to kind of take into one. So I'm just can't see that necessarily could be able to do that in one video. So it might be split across 2. But I'll have to see how long these are. But I think it's quite likely it'll be across two videos. But yeah, that's it for now. So not sure what to call this, but we will see. Yeah, we will see. Okay, see you on the next one.